folks, it's Jeff here. Just a quick reminder, if you're loving Disney Coast to Coast, there are a couple of easy ways that you can support the show. We'd love it if you could rate and review us on iTunes, or wherever you listen to the show. This is a simple way to help other Disney fans find us. Also, go ahead and share your favorite episodes on social media and be sure to tag us. You can find all of our social media information at DisneyCoastToCoast.com. And finally, I just want to say thank you to all of you who listen every week. Your support is very appreciated, and we love that you're enjoying our Disney geekiness. Now on with the show.
Is your magic meter running low? Well, we've got a cure for you. Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast.
Hey folks, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, the ultimate unofficial Disney fan podcast. I'm Jeff DePaoli.
And I'm Terri Hardin.
Hey Terri.
Hey.
Welcome to the show. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know Terri Hardin, she is a mega Muppeteer as well as an Imagineer, and you've had quite the career in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, all of a sudden you feel, you don't want to say you feel old, but you say, wow, that I better be old in order to accomplish some of these things I've written down.
Well, you started very young, I must say.
I guess so.
It's been an incredible career. But before we jump into your career, I actually just want to clear up some things about Imagineering that, Disney fans, like the folks that listen and watch this show, everybody knows about Imagineering. Of course, it started as Wet Enterprises with Walt Disney. My question is, I kind of want an official definition of an Imagineer, because just because you work for Imagineering doesn't mean you're an Imagineer, I believe, right? And
in some cases, it kind of depends on in what capacity you've worked as an Imagineer. And today's Imagineering is different from when I was an Imagineer at the studio. I'm still Walt Disney's legendary Imagineer because, like the tide, I'm being brought in for certain projects and not, they much rather do, the crash of 2008 made a lot of businesses realize they could do what many film industries had been doing from a long time, which was hire people on a case-by-case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Before that, they had employees, and I'm not saying they don't have employees, but they tend to lean towards that case-by-case-by-case hiring system because there's a lot of benefits to a company because there's no pension, there's no health you have to worry about. That becomes your burden, not their burden.
Okay.
On the other hand, if we look at it from my point of view, I really enjoy being more of a work for hire than I do being adopted. Mm-hmm. So
when, in those in-between times, when you're between projects with Imagineering, in the eyes of Disney, are you still an Imagineer?
Well, it depends on who you are. Okay. And by that, I mean, it doesn't mean like, okay, Terri, no. Jeff, yes. You know what I mean? It's more like, how do you handle yourself in the public eye?
Oh, okay.
If you're someone who is angry and frustrated because you thought you weren't getting paid enough or Imagineering didn't do right by you, whatever that attitude is, then I think a lot of them would say, no, that's not an Imagineer. But if you really embrace the fact that you were there and look at the benefits of when you were there, I was told by Tony Baxter that I was an employee for 12 years. Mm-hmm. So I went to work at Imagineering every day and I came home. But now I have my own business. So I like it that they'll call up and say, hey, Terri, we've got, for example, Shanghai, and we want to put you over there for a couple weeks. And I can go, no. Or I can go, yay. It's really up to me whether or not I do that or not. And I like that because I've been an Imagineer as an employee, and I've always been more of a work for hire because I worked in the film industry.
Okay.
The way I finally broke into Imagineering was that they were looking for fast, effective sculptors and designers, and they turned to the movie industry. That's how I finally, after years of applying, finally got in. They finally saw my work.
Now, when they bring in, guest creatives like a George Lucas or James Cameron, does the company look at them as Imagineers, or do they give them that title as well?
They'd like to. They absolutely would like to. I mean, if you've looked at the Legends, which becomes a small irritation with me, I'm just going to say
the Disney
Legends that Disney is doing, they're giving it to them for different reasons now.
Yes.
And they're skipping over people.
Yeah.
Who have designed rides all over the world and should be officially declared a legend. And I'm not saying it just because I'm all me, I, but a person does a voice and they become a legend. I just don't think that if you look way back at your Andreas Dejas, who have designed and sculpted and created and all of these things, it kind of, in my opinion only, and I have no catalytic converter on my mouth, so be careful, is that I really think that they're diluting the award if you're just going to give it to anybody who steps up that has a buck. Sorry, but that's the way I feel.
We've had this conversation on the show many times here because with Disney buying Marvel and Lucasfilm and such, there's a lot of now Mark Hamill is a Disney legend. And it's like, okay, well, I get it. He's a massive part of the Star Wars universe, but Disney simply bought Star Wars. But no, exactly. Well, especially when there's people like John Lasseter, who isn't a Disney legend.
Hello.
And Don Hahn, who isn't a Disney legend. So there's just a lot of that. But yes, I wholeheartly agree. But
I feel that's one of the things that just becomes like kind of an in me every time. But yes, so they love saying George Lucas legend, Mark Hamill legend, because they are wanting to capitalize on their new franchise. That's okay, but there's other ways you could do it. And I just don't think it should be the Disney legend, because we have Disney legends that really contributed to Disney other than, like you said, franchise bought.
I would agree with you very much. Now let's start with your career. I think you were working with the Muppets long before Disney, right?
Kind of simultaneously. Okay. So in 1982, those of you who were born then, in 1982...
The year of E.T.
In the year of E.T., yes. Yes, I was working with a puppeteer who is very well known in the industry. He did the Snuggles Bear. He did all kinds of really great characters, and I trained with him when I was about 20. And then later on, he brought me back to build the Chicken McNuggets. So before computer generated, we had Chicken McNuggets puppets that actually would sit on a shoulder and perform. Yeah. Yes. So I was among the team that built those. I should always say everything I say I built usually means a team's involved. So just when I say I mean team. But anyway, they flew me to New York. It was my first time ever being on first class airline. And I said, this is going to be as much as possible the way I fly.
This is the status quo.
This is what I want to do. And I got there, and long story short, my puppeteer friend, his name is Tony Urbano, he wanted to go to a opera. Mm-hmm. And it cleared the room. So of all the puppeteers who were there, the minute he said an opera, they were gone except for me, because I was young and stupid and I didn't understand what opera was. And he took me to the Met. I had to buy a box seat. That's all that was left. $80. That was a big deal back then, especially when you don't know what to expect. It was in a foreign language. Mm-hmm. And I nearly fell asleep. And it's really not, it's just, people love opera, but I was not one of these people at 20 years old. So I asked him what's in it for me. And he said, what do you want? And I said, I want to go see Jim Henson Studios. Mm. So the next day, he took me to Ha.
That's worth $80, by the way.
That was well worth it.
Yes.
He told me I wasn't going to meet Jim. And I said, really? And this is really funny, guys. I did not want to meet Jim. I wanted to go into the puppet building, because I built puppets. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to see how Miss Piggy and Kermit were built. Kermit, I got an idea. He's Kermit the Frog Fleece. You can actually go to a store and say, I want Kermit the Frog Fleece, for those of you who want to build Kermit.
Interesting.
But Piggy and Bunsen Honeydew were made in such a way that I couldn't figure out how they were made.
Very round heads,
and no fabric.
Yeah.
So I couldn't figure that out, so I wanted to go and find out what that was. Mm-hmm. And it's a process called flocking, by the way, using an electromagnetic current, which makes felt threads stand up on end, and they actually adhere themselves to the face, making a nice little skin. It's really neat.
Wow.
It's really neat. Anyway, I walk in, and Jim is there. And he automatically walks up to me. He automatically who are you?
Yeah.
Who are you? Because there were very few women. There are a few more now in the industry, but comparatively, women puppeteers who do television puppetry, we are probably 3 to about 30 men. Mm-hmm. And that's because we're inside things, not on top of them. So if you like to wear makeup, which you see I don't, it will adhere to all the dust and dirt and debris under there. So if a woman has to have makeup on, she doesn't necessarily make the best puppeteer, because you've got to get in some really grungy grungy areas, and it sticks to you if you have makeup, and it's pretty gross. So I'm in a seat, not on it. I'm under the floor, not in it. And in some cases, with the show Dinosaurs, I'm laying in fertilizer. So you just don't know what disgusting thing or weird thing you're going to be in. So women, for whatever reason, don't seem to want or not, gravitating to it at the time, my time. This could be different now, guys. So please don't, this was when I was really heavy during the 80s and 90s and the 2000s. Early 2000s was when I was a crazy heavy puppeteer. So that's what happened. Jim saw me. Tony said, "You are not. She is with me." I said, "No, I'm not. You just hired me. What are you talking about?" And I went down a staircase, a little door opened, and something went into my pocket, and I turned, and the door closed. So it was that fast. It was kind of like the Thing from from Addams Family. It just went into my pocket, and then I opened it up, and it said, "Call me, Jim Henson."
That is not a bad card to be put in your
That was pretty
pocket.
funny. So I think it was mainly because being a woman that he wanted to talk to me. And then when he called me up on the phone, which was pretty wild, he asked me for a voice demo tape. I sent him one. Then
They do that in puppetry as well. That's interesting. Huh, I didn't realize that.
Disney doesn't.
Okay.
Okay, Disney has this kind of strange attitude that if you're a puppeteer, you don't do voices, which is like, so crazy, so
That's
silly.
But I don't understand. Like, if you are a puppeteer, you clearly are doing voices.
Oh, all the time. But Disney goes, no, we need professionals. And you go, oh.
So it's like they replace the voices of puppets
Well,
with voiceover
let's
artists?
take Country Bears, for example. Country
Okay.
Bears was all replaced
movie.
with the movie, where we had the animatronic puppets and
Okay.
the characters. Now, the collateral beauty of that is that there was only one female character. So if we were doing the voices, we would have had what few females we had in the puppet industry, all trying to be Trixie.
Okay.
But because they told us up front they were going to definitely overdub our voices with professional voices,
That's interesting.
I could play any character I wanted when I was auditioning for that. And I went for Big Al, of course. And they were shocked. They were shocked. There were 6 puppeteers that went on the Disney lot to audition for Country Bears. And when I said Big Al, is what you got.
Yeah.
And what do you mean you want to play Big Al? Did I stutter?
Yeah.
I want to play Big Al. Everyone wants to play Henry or Barry. I said, that's everyone. I don't want to play Henry. I don't want to play Barry. I want to be Big Al. So they found that very interesting. And then they fired me. They didn't hire me. And I was like, no. And I found it really funny that I'm sculpting and crying because I didn't get this Country Bear movie. And then as a Christmas present, I got a call from Disney and they said, where do we send your contract over? And I'm like, excuse me, what? And they said, you're going to be on the Country Bears movie. And I was like, excuse me, what? Are you sure? This is Terri Hardin, Hardin. I was let go earlier in the year. And they said, I've got Terri Hardin right here, and she's playing Big Al and Trixie. I went, and Trixie?
Wow.
So I was really excited. I said, could you send that over now before I could sign it?
Before they change their mind.
They change their mind. Let me just get that really quick.
What was the reason for the change of mind, did they say?
Well, they needed, it's funny, in the Henson line of puppeteers, you're not hired by Henson. You are, again, a work for hire. They've always done that way. Movie industries always do it that way. So because you are a work for hire, they have you in a tier system. So I knew I was in the top 10 puppeteers. I just didn't know where. When they had to let go of one, there were 6 of us. Now I know my number. I'm number 6.
Gotcha.
So I'm not in the top 5, but I was in the top 10. And they had to let go of one, so that's the way it was. It was nothing personal, but I was surprised how personally I took it.
Yeah.
I just was really sad that I didn't get to do it. And then I called my associate at Henson, and he said, yeah, they changed their mind. They decided they wanted you to play those 2 characters. They thought, she wants to play it. Why should we saddle someone who doesn't want to play those characters when she was very excited to play them? Let's pull that girl back in.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I the first time, this whole like replacing the voices thing is actually a little surprising to me because when it comes to puppeteering, I'm so used to the Jim Henson Company where everybody knows, Jim was Kermit and, Frank Oz was Miss Piggy and all that. The first time I've heard of the Jim Henson Company actually replacing a voice was, I'm sure you're familiar with Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. I'm obsessed with that special. It's actually my favorite thing that the Jim Henson Company's ever done. I love Emmett Otter. The posters on the wall. But in any case, they replaced Frank Oz was Ma Otter, and then they replaced her voice because they wanted an actual female voice, and that's the first time I knew of that. And I didn't think they did that much within the Muppets, but you're saying Disney does it a lot.
They didn't. Jim knew that if the puppeteer could do its own voice, the character would emote far superior than having to play to a playback and sync with a lot of times when we were doing shows, the voice would be on stage and we would sync. So, for example, I do a little commercial out here called the Foster Farms Chickens in California and the West Coast. And if we do Spanish, we have to sync to Spanish-speaking actors. So I know a little Spanish. I'm not fluent, but I know enough that if I rate it, I know how to pronounce it. So syncing up, you would just ask them to do a little breath, or you would listen for something in the voice actor's voice to trigger you to move the mouth at the same time. And it's much more difficult. It takes much more precision. And I don't believe the characters, even when you dub an actor, I don't think you get the same emotion. So, for example, let's take Miyazaki and Lasseter, as you mentioned. All of the Miyazaki films, if they're dubbed in English, I feel you lose something. And in some cases, they've even changed the gender of a character, which makes me insane. So I always watch it Japanese with subtitles because I want to know what Miyazaki was feeling. I don't really want to know what the American people feel about it. I want to know what he liked. So anytime you overdub it, you might lose the emotion in the heart of what the character is trying to portray. So that's what Jim felt. Yeah.
Now you worked on Muppet Vision 3D, correct? With Jim Henson. I believe that was that Jim's last performance as Kermit?
Yeah. Well, we did. I think we did mini classics after that.
Okay.
So mini classics might have been. He was so busy, but it was fairly close because I was programming Penguins. The day after he died, which was
in the attraction?
For the attraction.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, they had us come and do the Penguin Band, which was cool.
That's obviously that was like such a shock when that happened.
Devastating.
When Jim Henson passed away, like that was.
Yeah.
It was a weird time, even because I know that he was making a deal with the Disney company. I know Disney owns the Muppets now, but it was supposed to happen so much sooner. And the stories I've heard, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the Henson family wasn't as keen on the deal as Jim was.
I think so. He agreed to come out and discuss the Muppets. In fact, he told me he'd sold them. He called me up in 1989 and said, Terri, and I said, yes. And he said, this is Jim Henson. And I said, shut the front door. No, it's not. And he said, yes, it is. And I said, no, it's not. And he said, don't argue with me. I don't have a lot of time. And I said, okay, you're Jim Henson. And he said, you refused to come out. He had asked me to come out to Manhattan to work with him. And I said, no. And he said, what do you mean, no? I'm Jim Henson. What makes you think you can work with me if you say no? And I said, I can't work in New York. It's just Manhattan I didn't like it. I don't think I could give you my best performance. So no, I'm not. I'm going to stay here. And he said, well, what makes you think you can do that? And I said, Dave Goles lives up north in California. That's Gonzo. Steve Whitmire, Baltimore, Kevin Clash, and blah. He goes, oh, you've done your homework. Okay. So in '89, he called me up and he said, I'm coming to California. I'm coming to do Muppet 3D. You are going to audition for me, and you better be good, or I will make your life hell. That's what he said. Nothing like a
no pressure, right?
Oh, none. And he said, bring your portfolio because I know you build, and I'm very interested in your style. So I said, okay, I'll yes, sir, no problem. And it was amazing. It was amazing. I did well, and if we had more room, I would demonstrate it, but that can happen later. So if you ever come and see me personally, say, will you tell the Muppet story? Because it is a funny one of my audition. But it came through. He and I were designing a show when he passed away.
Wow.
And that show never saw the light of day. But it was great to sit next to him and me. And, I'm sketching and he's pointing. And we don't, the problem is people go, do you have pictures? You don't take pictures on a set floor. It's not appropriate.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the people that I've worked with, I don't have shots. I have one with Michael Jackson because Michael Jackson's photographer, Michael himself, felt sorry for me because I wasn't asking him to take my picture, Michael. I just didn't do that. And so he came over and he said, you're the only one that hasn't asked me, and you're one of my closest associates. And I said, Michael, it just doesn't seem appropriate. He said, well, I'm making it appropriate. I want a picture with you. And he took a picture. That being said, it kind of sounds high and mighty, doesn't it? I was not above showing him my portfolio for future work. So, maybe I just... So I'm not that all that awesome. I was just focused on what's my next job with Michael Jackson more than I was a selfie.
Yeah, and that's Captain EO, of course, which we'll get to in a little bit. For so many people, going on a Disney vacation requires years of saving. So the last thing you want after scrimping and saving is added stress on top of that. So why not make it easier for yourself and let our Season 4 sponsor, Adventures Out There Travel, do the heavy lifting for you? Perhaps you're planning for your first Disney vacation and you're feeling overwhelmed because there's so much to do and see. Well, don't worry. Adventures Out There Travel has you covered. Their agents specialize in making suggestions based on the type of activities you tell them you want to experience. Whether heading to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, or on a Disney cruise, Adventures Out There Travel can help you out. Go to adventuresouttheretravel.com for your free, no-obligation quote.
So Jim and I, when we did Muppet 3D, it was a real joy to have someone pick me, not because I had a female voice, but because I was a good puppet performer, and that was Jim Henson. In California Coast, they always cast you for the voice. If you were a woman and you were a puppeteer, and they had a woman character, you got the audition. But most of the characters were written for men, so there weren't a lot. Now, that being said, I have a bit of a deep voice, as you noticed, so a lot of times for Jim Henson, I played the boys.
Okay.
So young adolescent boys and little boys and characters like that, because I can't hit the super high notes many women can. I'm more of a tenor. Mm-hmm. So that's where Jim saw the voice aspect, and later Brian was putting me in those kind of roles if I was going to do a voice at all.
What roles did you perform in Muppet Vision 3D?
Muppet Vision 3D was so cool.
Which is still running in Florida, happy to say.
So cool. Such a good experience. All the puppeteers that were selected for that wanted to be next to Jim or next to Frank, and Frank only came out for a brief time, long enough for me to get my Miss Piggy ornament signed, is the way I say it. He just kind of flew in for that, of course. No, he didn't fly. But they all wanted to be the right hand. So the way puppets work
yes,
is the right hand usually goes in the head, and the left hand makes the left hand move. Bunsen Honeydew, Miss Piggy, Rod, whatever. Jim would always usually do Kermit the Frog all himself. There's a pinchy thing that he could use that would make him do that. But most of the time, you had an assistant that works your right hand, because your right hand is up in there. And if you watch The Muppet Show, or you even watching Muppet 3D, you'll know when the lead, which is the guy who's puppeteering in the head, is tired of what the right hand is doing. So the left hand will do this. And it's his way on camera of telling the right hand, you're doing too much, calm down, stop it.
That's funny.
Isn't that funny?
That is funny.
That's a puppet secret for you guys. If you're watching it and you ever see the character just gently go like this and hold that right hand, it's because it's their way of saying, that's too much and I'm not really happy. But I really wasn't interested in being a right hand. I had been a lead in California more than I wanted to be, and I loved being an assistant, but I just thought, I'm so happy to be here. Whatever you need me to do, I want to do.
Yeah.
So I played a lot of background characters, and I'm sure if you watched that show enough, during the parade sequence where the soldiers are moving, you'll see somebody's head along the bottom of the frame like this.
Really?
Yes, and it's our friend Len Levitt. He was so tall.
Oh, God.
That, and it's really funny because he's looking at the camera like this. And it's so funny.
Oh, no.
It's really funny. So look for that during the parade sequence. But we were operating the parade characters. I did the Small World characters, which are absolutely hideous in that show. They're so top heavy that their head, you would try to puppeteer them and their head would go all distorted. So they're kind of fun to watch because they become very creepy. But I did those, and what else did I do? Small world characters, those, and then crowd scenes a lot of times. Yeah.
And you were involved after as well. It sounds like when you were programming the penguins. Did you program Statler and Waldorf up in the balcony?
No, but we got to play. So what happens is Disney has modules all over Southern California. So you have Imagineering, which is on Flower Street, and that's where we do most of the design phase. So you have your concept artist and you have your sculptors in the model shop and stuff around Flower Street. I was actually in the Chastain building, which is off of that, but they have all these buildings surrounding Flower Street. And then they have what we call the Tahunga building. The Tahunga building is in the valley near to where the house I grew up. And in that, they build the actual sets. So, for example, the witch from Wizard of Oz, they had her figure built at Maypo for Mary Poppins. All the audio animatronics were built there, and then they would dress her up, they would put her, and then they'd mock the ride, and then they would invite Imagineers to come over and ride it, and someone would push you through, and then you would see all the show and stuff, and then you can make a comment. What do you think? How do you feel? Do you think it's a good show? Blah, blah, blah. So they did this with the theater of Muppet 3D. They built the theater, they built the stage, and we played all of the characters as puppets so that the people who were Florida representatives and other Disney representatives could have that experience. So I got to play the rabbit. My favorite was playing Sweetums. You know, I got to be Sweetums sometimes. I got to be Statler and Waldorf sometimes. Most of the time they gave that to the men. But every once in a while I got to do it. It was a lot of fun. And Frank came down to coach us on certain things. So after Jim died, I had a really touching conversation with Frank about, not having him around anymore. And I knew it was devastating for me. I could just imagine what it was for him. And he said, not the same, because of Bert and Ernie, for example. Yeah. Not the same. So it was kind of rough. It was kind of rough.
Now, around this time, I've always heard these stories. I wonder if you have heard of this as well. Stories about how that whole Muppet thing at Disney MGM Studios was supposed to be like a Muppet land. There was going to be more attractions and a restaurant. And the thing that always excited me most was the Great Muppet Movie Ride, which was going to be a spoof of the Great Movie Ride at the park. What do you know about this? Had you heard anything about this while working there?
Yeah. The biggest problem was at the time I was doing Splash Mountain Tokyo, and they loaned me out to, that's the other thing, the right hand sometimes doesn't know what the left is doing. So the Disney Studios asked, Jim requested me to come, and they said no problem, because right now we can spare her. They sent me over to do Muppet 3D, and then I went back to sculpt Splash, and I said to them, if you have any kind of problems, you need me back, just let me know. And because we shoot till about 5 o'clock, and I can work from 5 till like 10 on the Imagineering project that I have. So I don't mind coming later or going in early if you need my help. And they said, oh, that's great, no problem, don't worry about it. Well, then I got back and I was sculpting, and my whole team, there was 10 of us working on Splash Tokyo. My whole team said, we hear Jim is coming on Tuesday to look at the sculptures of the theater. Do you think he would come by and see you? We'd really like to meet him. And so I called him. And that was the day before he died. So that night I said, you don't sound well. He said, it's just a little cold. And the next day he was gone. I was so devastated. And Imagineering came to me and they said, look, we can't send you home. We need you here to finish we've got a deadline. So they isolated me so that I could sort of deal with that loss. But that was just a little too close for comfort. Yeah. But to answer your question, he passed away. Yeah. And so his visions were not necessarily Brian's vision. Yeah. Brian is a different cat. So he had a different vision. Brian Henson, he had a different... Brian became the head of the entire studio. Lisa became in charge of, like, for example, Sesame Street. Now, as I understand it, Lisa has a bigger role. And then Cheryl had a role as well. So they each had facets, but Brian was the new Jim Henson position. Yeah. And he had a different attitude about a lot of things. So there were changes. I'm not going to blame it on him, but if the family was like hesitant, he probably pulled back, way back.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you some tough questions about the Muppets. If you don't want to answer them, we can cut this out. I'm assuming you're paying attention to what the Muppets are doing these days.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Why do you think it's not working with the Disney company right now? I know it's a tough question, but I mean, I watched the sitcom.
And it sucked.
It was
Sorry.
It was not the
Is that too
Muppets.
harsh?
Is how it felt. It just wasn't the same. And I would go back and forth with this because I feel like the company is investing in it. We've had 2 movies, we've had a TV show, we've got some theme park stuff happening, but it just doesn't seem to be connecting.
Yeah.
Do people, or at least youngsters, not connect with puppets anymore? Do they want just CG, or is it something else? What do you think's going on
So
there?
here's what's lucky about this podcast, guys, is that I have no, how do we say this? No stake
No filter?
in no filter, and also no stake in, oh my God, what if the Muppets don't hire me again? What if Disney doesn't hire me again? I have my own business. So what does that mean to you? It means I can tell you the truth.
Good, I love
Right?
that.
And we have to be fair to those people who can't, because, you want to keep your job. All right. If you are an employee, there are certain things you may or may not say because you want to keep your job. And that's going to be 90% of your Legends and Imagineers because they love their company. And it doesn't mean that I don't love my company, but the difference is that this is something that's, you've hit on something very close to me. So the minute Disney bought the Muppets and they became Muppet property, Brian washed his hands of it. That's number one. Brian no longer really discusses Muppets. They're not his anymore. So he doesn't worry. Is he getting some sort of royalty because of the creation of them? Who knows? But really, in Brian's head, it appears to me, and these are all my impressions, guys, that he washed his hands of it. Mm-hmm. You say, Brian, Muppets, what are you talking about? Disney owns Muppets. But what Disney started to do right away was to look and audition Soundalikes. Now, what that means is instead of hiring Kermit the Frog, Steve Whitmire originally, and Steve Whitmire was handpicked by Jim to be Kermit. This is a big deal. This is a scary thing, to put your hand in a puppet of your mentor because he's no longer with you and then create a character. Let's not play this lightly. Steve took on a position that I don't know if he would have been able to do if Jim hadn't put his hand on his shoulder and said, you're it. If anything happens to me, you're it. Mm-hmm. That's a tough thing. Now, the other characters, like you've got Gonzo and you've got Miss Piggy, et cetera, those characters were not passed. And Disney was still looking for Soundalikes, people who sounded like Miss Piggy but might take less money.
But just because you can sound like a character doesn't mean you can puppeteer. That's what's so interesting to me in that respect, because I do voiceover stuff and, I can do some of the Muppets and people are like, oh, you should audition. I'm like, I'm not a puppeteer. Mm-hmm. I would never audition for that. So,
and that was what they were looking for. They were looking for puppeteers who could sound like the characters, and they asked me to audition. And when I went in, I said, the funny thing is, I said to everyone in the audition room, the funny thing is my goal was never to sound like a character that was somebody else's.
Yeah.
I did not make myself, I am a puppeteer.
Yeah.
And I do voices, but I never sat there and said, let me duplicate Jim Henson characters. This wasn't there, maybe for sure, really. But I just, I didn't care whether I sounded like her. I just liked her.
Yeah.
So my point was, I don't like what's happening. I told him at the audition, I said, I don't understand why you need Soundalikes. You've got the people. What could be better than having the actual people that Jim handpicked? And they just kind of looked at me and they said, and Lisa was sitting in the group and she said, okay, what do you want to do then? And I named a couple of characters that I had created in relation to those characters, because that's the way Brian and Jim worked with me was, okay, where can we put you? But you're going to do the voice. You're going to do this character. And so I just said, let me do the characters I developed. And they didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
They were looking for Soundalikes. Now, why? Control. For one thing, you're not going to have to pay them as much possibly. And the other thing is you can control what the characters do. This was why Muppets has not been hitting, in my opinion. You have to be true to the original characters. I know in your head you're thinking millennials want a more jazzy, more upbeat, more now series, but the series wasn't now. It was so 5 minutes ago. We had seen it in The Office. How old was The Office when they did that? And then they made Miss Piggy mean. And they made Kermit kind of bland. So we did not respond to those characters because they weren't the Fozzie Bear stealing.
Yeah.
Fozzie Bear doesn't steal, you know? And I remember watching it and going, I don't understand what are they trying to convey here? You know, Kermit has another girlfriend. What?
Yeah.
You know, it just, because you're watching Muppet movie. That's the epiphany of Jim Henson's characters at their finest. And then you watch the series. And they finally started to get it the last 3 shows. I think the last 3 shows really were strong. And I was working on it. I was brought in about mid season to play background characters, which was awesome. I love that. And my favorite show was the one about Miss Piggy's tail, you know, popping up. That was very Muppets, and meaning Joan Jett was amazing.
Yeah.
But the point is that whole storyline was we were like, oh, we love this because this is what the Muppets are about. But it just wasn't.
Too little, too late.
Too little, too late is a perfect way of saying it, Jeff.
Yeah, I really hope they can figure it out. I know Muppet Babies is coming back, and I know they just did that show at the Hollywood Bowl, and so they seem to be trying to make it work. It just, and of course, there's the big Steve Whitmire mess recently, so it's a lot going on with the Muppets, and I hope they can figure out.
Well, and
how to
Steve,
work 'em.
bless his heart, he just wanted to keep the integrity of his character.
Yeah.
And he thought others did too, but it comes down to this. If you are a Muppet character and Disney comes to you and says, you're either with Steve or you're with us, if you're with Steve, you're not going to have your character.
Yeah.
And you have to, you know, you're making the decision, I can't have somebody else in my character.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with my character. And I know that it probably hurt Steve greatly. And I feel for Steve because I was not in a position that I had been handpicked by Jim Henson to play one of those iconic characters.
Yeah.
But that's a dilemma, character or, you know, my friend. And they wanted the integrity of the character, as did Steve.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a rough decision for many of the people who were the iconic characters. They stayed with their characters because they had been developing it since day one. So I don't know if I'm defending it or denying it or any way, but I feel for both of them in that case because they really shouldn't have been put in that position in the first place.
Yeah.
But they were.
Yeah.
And this, you know.
Well, thank you for your honesty with that.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
it. It hurt me. It felt really sad that this is the way they work, but this is the business, and you have to kind of say to yourself, okay, if this is the business, how am I going to put myself in this situation? And the reality of it is I tend to do background characters, and I haven't been asked to do characters for Henson because I think Henson is a little angry when you take a job. Like I took this Disney job, and they were casting for another show, and they didn't invite me to do it. That's the risk you take, you know? I mean, if my work doesn't speak for itself, you're going to let something political put me there, then I can either stand in a corner and, you know, or I can just say, okay, whatever, move on.
Yeah.
You know, in today's world, you can move on. Why? Because you have YouTube, you have Kickstarter, you have Facebook. So you can create your own shows. So if
like this one.
Exactly. If nobody's hiring you, then do this because you have these venues that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
So this is what I love about today and the world today as compared to when I was growing up and I was auditioning, was that you can just post it and create something like this and you control it. And then doesn't mean that Disney isn't watching.
Yep.
And they might pluck you. And wouldn't it be better if they came to you than you going to them and saying, we'd love for you to be an Imagineer? So earlier you asked me, what's the definition of an Imagineer? It's being of service. What does that mean? Imagineering is collaboration. You have the creme de la creme of everybody in Imagineering coming together and leaving their egos on the table. It doesn't mean we don't have an ego. I think I've demonstrated that I do. But we understand that we can learn from each other in a way that is not always possible. You've got the best minds in the world creatively, and you're working with them together in a venue that Walt created, and it is just better than any drug you could take, any movie you could watch, any game you could play on your phone. It just doesn't compare to the joy and the experience. And then you create something cool, super cool. I mean, and then afterwards you look at that, or you ride it, or you step on it, or you touch a piece that you sculpted, Dragon's Lair in Paris for me, that I really have a hand in this? And that I did all by myself. Nobody helped me with Dragon's Lair. But at Imagineering with Dragon's Lair, I went to Paris last year and I walked through it, and I just...
It's my favorite castle, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I love that castle.
It is the number one castle in the world. Why? Because there's a dragon underneath it. So you can love your castles in Florida, and you can love... But it's the only one with a dragon underneath.
And it's kind of a surprise.
Cool. It is a big surprise.
Like, I went teenager. I don't remember hearing anything about it when I went. And you go in and you're like, oh my God, there's like a full-scale animatronic fire-breathing smoke.
Scary.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I'm so proud of it, and I'm thankful to Tony Baxter because he gave me sole control over what it was going to do. And I'm a woman, and I'm not apologizing, obviously, but at Disney, a woman having that much control over an attraction of this caliber, and I'm a lath and plaster cement girl. I'm not a concept artist like an Irvine, let's say. It was just not heard of. And the reason was not because, you remember Meryl Streep saying, Walt Disney was a show.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes actors should really not talk. But he wasn't. Imagineering wanted the shortest distance between 2 points. So the park is in Paris, and you have Italians and you have French, and we know they just love women, and that women are equal. Not at that time. So Disney said, if I have men overseeing men, then I'll get my park on schedule and on time. That's the main reason. Now, I felt that I could handle it, but by the same token, I got it, and they were kind enough to explain to me. So I had to teach, after designing Dragon's Lair, I had to teach a man what I had done. So that was people were like, oh, I can't believe it. But it would, I just picked a good man who understood my concept, my art, my thoughts, and he did a great job. And to walk through and see your work, to sail under Big Thunder, I did the arch, and I took the keel boat and went under my arch.
This is Paris as well, right?
In Paris, yeah. So it's a, you kind of pick your battles. But now, look at you all here who are watching this amazing podcast. And, he didn't have to audition. He didn't have to say, can I buy radio time? You just started it.
Nobody would have given it to me.
And now maybe they would.
Yeah.
But you understand that if you want to be an Imagineer, the best thing to do is to just post what you're doing. But this is very important to the artists out there. Post your dream, because I can't read your mind.
Yeah.
So if you're posting all your art and getting likes, that's cool. But if you want a job as an Imagineer, be sure you say, I'd like to be an Imagineer.
Yeah.
So here's my artwork, and people scroll through it on Instagram or whatever. But do that one of you going, I'm an Imagineer. I see myself as an Imagineer. Because I've talked to many people who have been hired by Disney who did things like a comic strip on Facebook or did illustrations, and they were picked up. They were hired. So they're looking. They're watching you. So don't be afraid to share your dream with the world.
It's interesting because usually in Imagineering, it seems like people have a very, very, very specific skill. And obviously yours is sculpting when it comes to Imagineering, but you also have this puppeteering side of you that I feel like most Imagineers don't, or at least you don't hear too much about it. It just seems like if you're going to do Imagineering, you're not going to be like the guy with all these ideas that does all these different things. It's going to be, no, you're the concept artist, or you're the sculptor, or you're the engineer, or whatever. So it's interesting how you have really had the best of both worlds when it comes to puppeteering as well as sculpting for Imagineering.
And you want to know why? Because I didn't buy that book. So what do I mean by that? You don't buy the book. Okay, get in. However they say you get in.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, yeah. Get your salary, whatever. But the big thing with me was everybody was saying, Disney doesn't pay enough. Disney doesn't pay enough. Oh, you're going to take a pay cut. Blah, 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 blah. Well, in dollars, let's say that's true. I'm not saying it is. I thought I was paid good. Well, I've got paid what I asked for, so it's partially my fault if I thought it was less. But the point is that there are these perks. For example, as a sculptor, I could make any call anywhere to any company in the world and just say, I'm Disney Imagineer. I'm interested in your clay. Could you send me a sample? And a truck would back up. You know, they'd call you back and go, yes, make sure you're Imagineer. And then, you know, it could be paint. It could be so an artist could literally reach out. And so there's a pay there.
Yep.
That's a perk. Imagineering was a creative venue, so Halloween, everything closed down. So you dressed up in costume and you competed for prizes, and I met the 90 Men. They were judges. Most of them were judges when I was there. It was just, it's a fantastic then was a fantastic place to work. Tony Baxter says now it's a little different, and I can see that, I can feel that, but when I went in, it was exactly, Disney is telling you, be specific. So I want to be a concept artist. And Terri has always done, I want to be a jack of all trades, master of all. So I want to be a bargain. So what happened is I went in the rockwork division and the model division as a sculptor. That's how I got my in. Sculptors said, rocks, so boring, blah, blah. Don't listen to that. Don't buy it. Because rocks are amazing. They're a big challenge, and it took me some time to understand how to create rock work that look real. But then I just kept saying to people, I'd really love to be in the sculpture department. You know, I'd love to be in the sculpture department. By the way, I love it here, but I want to be, you just every once in a while share your dream, because now you're in. And how can you make others notice you so that they go, that person should be here? So let's say you started in the mailroom. The costume contest was a perfect, the Halloween competition was a perfect place for you to show people that are above you. Roy Disney was there. Ken Anderson, Ward Kimball, Bob Gurr. They were all there watching us do it. So I made these very elaborate costumes, and I sculpted amazing pumpkins, and I taught people how to do stuff. And they noticed me. And they said, wow. And I was always talking in voices like you're talking about, because they're, oh, I'm okay, I'm great, and they would go, Terri, why don't you go down and Foley? We heard you do the voice, and you're just playing. You're happy with what you're doing, yo ho, yo ho. People are like, this girl's a nut. But it's kind of silent marketing. It's not telling people that you're not happy where you are. You're very happy where you are. But that's going to end. And what's your biggest, I love doing this, but my dream would be ultimately, eventually, to be in the department. And I ended up there later. I actually made it there. And I actually did Muppets and these things that I sketched. All kinds of crazy stuff in Imagineering they said you could not do. Okay? But that's because people came in and they bought that book and they said, oh, I have to focus. Now, many artists, that's what they do. They focus. Like my friend Brian Jowers, he is an amazing painter. He has no interest really in doing anything else but painting. He loves to paint. He lives to paint. He's an amazing painter. So you can kind of lean over into sculpture, but do you want to be hired as a sculptor? Maybe you want to play at sculpture like I play at painting, but I don't know if you're necessarily going to hire me as a painter, or do I want that,
So before Disneyland Paris, originally Euro Disney, where you did the Dragon Lair as well as Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. Before that, you had Captain EO that you worked on, which that was the beginning of the Eisner days. And I know you have some choice words for Eisner, but actually, before we get to EO, tell me the favorite thing that Eisner did during his time with the company. Because personally, I like Eisner. I didn't work for him, so
Eisner's
I get
hilarious.
But what do you think, like, for the company he did?
His favorite thing was being a part of the creation of Hollywood.
Disney's Hollywood Studios.
Hollywood Pictures.
Oh, Hollywood Pictures, the movie studio.
He's a movie. He was a movie guy. Total movie guy. He was all about film. He really loved film, and he liked the parks, but he loved film. He was all about, and he wanted to do grittier films than G rating, and we know Disney means G. And thank God it does, because there's less and less and less G, unless it's animation, and thank God for animation. But he loved movies. He loved being a part of the whole movie scene. He loved being on camera.
I think Iger likes movies more than Eisner.
Well, he might, but I'm not there, so I don't know if Iger was taking the money from the parks creation in order to fund his studio.
Okay, now we need to get in this conversation, because my biggest complaint right now with Walt Disney World in Florida is the fact that it has now been the longest period of time since a new theme park was built for that resort. So when Eisner was there, so we had, before Eisner, 1982 was Epcot, 7 years later, 1989, Disney MGM Studios, and then, 9 years later, 1998, was Disney's Animal Kingdom. We haven't had a new theme park since then.
Oh, but was that him?
Well, that's my question. I mean, he
dun, dun, dun. The thing was, the parks were very, very profitable. So if you're going to get your movie studio off the ground,
that's interesting,
and you need money from the parks, and more parks generate more money, this was what I feel. Now, I feel this because Big Thunder, let's take Big Thunder Paris. Eisner was all about Paris. We had a certain amount of money to create an amazing attraction, but he kept picking at our budget, taking money for the studio's film thing, and we had to take things away that you don't know about. You may love Big Thunder Paris, I do, but what it was amazing. And it's amazing now, but it was spectacular. And we had to sacrifice part of our show because the budget was being cut, and you never knew when you came in whether or not your ride was going to be targeted or not, your attraction. And you were fighting for. The one thing nobody touched in Paris was the castle. There were over 145 castles created because that's the castle capital of the world, and you had to have a cool castle there. So the castle was safe, but every other land was kind of nervous. Like, is Michael Eisner going to... and Imagineers weren't happy because we're trying to make a quality park for an experience for all of you to enjoy, and we've got somebody leaning in like a snake in a rat cage, gobbling up the budget, and we were just like, we would say we would have an overseer, a supervisor of sort that would kind of keep you on track with the rest of the land, and you would ask him, can't we stop him? Is there any way to talk to him and help him understand that we've got work here? Just please give us a number and don't touch it anymore.
No, that can definitely get frustrating. I see that.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thought, the fact that the movie studio was his priority.
It really was. It really, really was. Now, if we take Iger nowadays, my concern, and I can't blame Iger, I don't know Iger, I have not had an experience with Iger, but I feel that I feel the company is trying to take the Walt out of Disney.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
That's killing me.
Well, that's why I insist on this show. It's kind of a joke at this point because I insist on it so much, but I do not accept it when people call it Disney World. I'm like, no, this is Walt Disney World. It is the one park that bears his name. I had a fit before the first movie I saw it on. I think it was the first movie that did it, but perhaps there was one sooner, was the 2011 Muppet movie. And instead of saying Walt Disney Pictures with the castle, it simply said Disney.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the theater and going, what?
Yeah, exactly.
And like,
what?
People I were with were like, well, what are you upset about? And of course, you can't get into it right as a movie is starting. But like, are you kidding me? So yes, it's interesting because there are definitely areas of the company that really want to keep Walt's spirit alive. Like, D23, I feel like is pretty good about that. But then there are areas where I feel like maybe not so much.
Yeah, it's a really strange thing, and I don't understand why you would do it. And Roy felt it coming.
Yeah.
Which is why he they created the Disney Family Museum.
Yeah.
That was a thorn, I believe. I don't know for sure, but I don't think that those who were trying to take the Walt out of Walt Disney liked the idea that Roy and that they were able, and Diane were able to create this because it's so close, and it is the Walt. It's the Walt Disney Museum.
Yeah.
If you have any doubt that Walt didn't create this legacy, you only need to go up north and find it. So that was kind of a thorn in their side, and that's what I think is keeping them from being able to call it just Disney. And I don't know why you would want to do that, but then the other day I asked a young person, I remember talking to a young person, and he said, well, wasn't Walt just this big chauvinist that pushed people around? And if that's your attitude, then I can understand that maybe some people thought there's no reason to have him there, but he's also someone who walked the parks and met people and shook their hand and took pictures, and I never got the opportunity to meet him, but I know he was just an amazing individual that came up with an amazing situation, and I don't like my art stolen from me. Yeah. So I would hate for someone to steal it from him. But this is what I'm feeling, and I feel it as you pull in Star Wars, which is going to be fun and it's going to be cool, and see it early. Pandora, what? It may be a really cool ride, but what does it have to do? What? Yeah. You know, it's just they're. It's kind of like an artist and Doug Squirrel, you know, where I'd really like to see Disney create more Disney stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm a Star Wars fanatic. I mean, you get me on Star Wars, don't even start, because I remember a person who liked the first 3 films, and my friend who was a collector put me opposite them because I hate The Phantom Menace and its nice little cohorts. I try to ignore that they were even ever made. And we were having this battle. They loved having, because I'm really passionate about that movie. That movie put my feet upon the path as an artist. So Disney, hand in hand with Star Wars, it's cool. Just don't forget where your feet are. Your feet are planted in a Walt Disney park.
Yeah, well, speaking of Star Wars and George Lucas, of course, that brings us back to Captain EO, which, tell me, what was your job on that production? And
what a great experience. Where was I when I got the call? I was living in a studio, an apartment with my husband and my first husband. So I was very young, and I get this call, and they said, how would you like to work with Michael Jackson? And
yes, please.
I said, okay. My mom was a huge fan, and I was kind of an average fan. Music is not my passion as much as film. So I knew Michael, who didn't. And then George Lucas, this is getting better, and Francis Ford Coppola. I'll work for free, because I was a huge, and still am a huge Godfather fan. I love Coppola and the Godfather series. In fact, my husband goes, really? Again? You're watching that? Just put it on a loop, or you can alternate it with Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Clint Eastwood. So those are 2 of my super favorite gritty things. And and so I said, I'll come. So they brought me in originally to build the Whip Warriors, which are the warriors that attacked Michael Jackson. I had a drawing, and I had to create them in 3 dimensions. And I remember asking them, are dancers going to be in them? And they said, no, they're just going to walk and whip. And then they put dancers in them. And that's why helmets fell off and stuff. Because I said, it would be nice if you told me this so I could make it so a dancer is comfortable in what you gave me, but I digress. At the time, I was at the studio, a small studio in Culver City. They called my home and asked me if I wanted to audition to do a puppet.
Nice.
And I came home and got the message. We used to have answering machine, beep. We did not have cell phones. We had pagers, little box you hooked on. And they called my home, and I called them back and said, I am in Studio 11 on the lot. Next day, they said, well, if you're not interested, you could at least give us the courteous call. And I got really upset. And I went down into the production office, and I said, look, I'm Terri Hardin. You're looking for me. And they said, yes. And I said, come out here. I'm down there. And they went, oh. And they said, well, we wanted to see if you wanted to audition for a character. And I think the reason I got Idie and Odie, honestly, the 2 bird-headed characters, was because I could lift them.
Oh.
They were really, really heavy. Each head was about 15 pounds, and that was without the body.
Wow.
And then the body. So to be able to lift them over my head for any duration of time and perform them, they were shocked. They were just shocked at how great the characters came to life. Thank you, Ghostbusters, because I had been doing movie puppets, and movie puppets are not necessarily built so human puppeteers can perform them. They're often cumbersome, heavy, so you've got to work your upper body to make sure you can handle them for more than 2 seconds. Sometimes they're just so heavy, you just go, seriously, dude? What'd you put lead in here? What?
Yeah.
So that was how I got then they cast me as Idie and Odie. I also did parts of Hooter where Tony Cox, who was in the suit, could not necessarily do it. When you push the red button, that's me lifting the puppet and my hands in the trunk, and I push the red button because Tony, forget it. He was like, really?
I hear Michael Jackson was like a huge Walt Disney fan.
Oh, he loved it.
Did he like ever any
he's
stories
adorable.
about?
Oh, he's so adorable. What a great young man. I can't tell you all the stories, but we hit it off almost immediately because I kept teasing him. At one point, I played a whip warrior, and I work a really mean bullwhip. That's just note to self, note to y'all. Watch out. I could work a really mean bullwhip. I wanted to play Catwoman, and so I trained so that I could work the whip. Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman, one of my favorites. And I chased him all over the soundstage. I said, "Run, Michael!" And he was like, "Oh, oh!" And I cracked the whip all around him. "Oh, what are you doing? Oh, what are you doing?" And Francis going, "Terry, get over here, or I'm going to have to step on you." So it was really a neat set. We had Angelica Houston. She was about to win her first Academy Award for Prissy's Honor. And Michael, who was just a genius, said he was like a small, I treated him more like my son at the time. I had a stepson. And he was 12, and I just looked at Michael as about 12, unless he was dancing or creating music. Then he was, but really just like he would have, get this, guys, he would have every morning a crate of grapes sent to his dressing room, and then we would have a grape fight. I mean, rich kids with money, right? We'd have a grape fight before we started in his trailer. And he just absolutely thought it was the most fun ever. And we just thought, okay,
You did mention that you worked on the Henson ABC Disney show, Dinosaurs. Have you heard any rumors about that coming back? Because I feel like I'd heard
Gosh,
something.
I'd love it if they did it. And I'd love for them to call me. Whether or not they will, that's going to be their decision.
Yeah.
But
do you know if it's happening though?
I don't know.
Okay.
No, but the DVDs are out, guys, and those shows, many of those shows are award winning.
Yeah.
I mean, we won awards for several of those shows. One being the Graptolites, which is where there's two little Graptolites that are the last ones in existence, and Robbie wants to protect them from being eaten because once they're eaten, they're extinct. And that show got tons of awards. Teachers thought, oh, it's so, oh, what are you teaching children?
Yeah.
And yet it was just amazing.
Literally the most depressing series finale of all time.
Oh,
when
yes.
basically the Ice Age is approaching and the dinosaurs are dead.
Yeah, and at
really
that point,
dark.
And at that point, once again, guys, they needed to get rid of one puppeteer, and I was it. That last year, I did not get to do it. I went on to Flintstones, but that was and what a great show! It was a fantastic show. We stopped filming because Disney no longer wanted to deal with the budget. It wasn't for a lack of ratings. You all loved it, which is why these DVDs are so wonderful to have now. And I hope I don't know if they stream or not, but I just adore the show. I thought this was I was Baby's arms, so what's not to love? Yeah. I got to hit and strike, and Kevin did Not the Mama, and I got to do all of the hand gestures and stuff. And I really thought I had the better job. That just goes to show you. But and then I would do eyes on other characters, and Brian said to me, each year we had an evaluation, and Brian said, "I don't think you have enough drive in this company. I don't think, you don't seem to be, everyone's pushing for their own character, and you don't." I said, "Brian, it has nothing to do with my drive. I was a lead for years before your father came to town. I love being an assistant. I'm an assistant on one of the greatest characters. I am on the best character. I am Baby's arms. Why would I want to leave that? It just doesn't make sense to me."
Yeah.
We did commercials, we did rock videos, we did all these really cool things with Baby that was outside of Dinosaurs. I would never leave that character. I said, I don't want to leave that character. I love working with Kevin. I love working with everybody that was associated with the character. I loved being the character. I was arms, and Brian just couldn't get that. arms are arms, but no. Let me be dead, and you act your hiney off, Mr. Lead, and without the hands, you're nothing. They're just going to hang right here.
Yeah.
I'm going to prove how important to a puppet a team is. You cannot have Kevin Clash was the voice, Kevin Clash was the lead. But without John Kennedy on the eyes and me on the arms, it's just a talking head with no emotion.
Yeah.
I don't care how good you are. So acknowledge your team, and they would acknowledge the eye guy and they would acknowledge the lead guy, but they never would acknowledge the assistants with the character. Brian just didn't believe in that, where his father did. Mm-hmm. That's just two different points of opinion, and I banged heads with Brian Henson a lot because I said, let me show you how important the hands are. But he was, I'll put you in, additional puppeteers was where my credit would be.
Yeah.
It was just a difference of opinion. Mm-hmm. And so, but I loved being an assistant because an assistant has to become in sync with whoever the lead is. So the lead leads and you follow, but you must follow in a way that you are all of one mind. Mm-hmm. And that's not always easy. But what it does free you up to do is every once in a while you'll get a character, like I got to be a character in When Food Goes Bad. I got to be one of the food characters that terrorizes the family, which was so fun. I got to be a student whenever Charlene was in, because wherever Baby was not, I was free to play those sideline characters, which meant I had I'm showing my MO, a variety of stuff I got to do. So I really, really love that. On the new Muppet show, people are combating to be on camera, but I'm now older, and it's the same pay whether you're up in the front or you're in the back. So there were a few that I remember. There was a character we did for this Joan Jett one, I said, and I was working with a new up-and-coming puppeteer, and he said, why don't you be the lead and I'll be the assistant? I said, oh, no, you get to be the lead. And he was like,
yeah, but
it's you. And I was like, yeah, it is me, and I would rather you do the puppet part and let me just assist you. Yeah. And I really work best as a right arm if I'm able to touch you behind your back, because that way if you move, I can feel where you're going and stay with you and anticipate. Because what you don't understand as a puppeteer when you're working like that is that the body gives signals. It'll give little signals, and you start to learn what your lead does. So Kevin and I were like we were one person. In fact, TV Guide said, Terri is so close she smells like him when she goes home. But that's what you want to do. You want to anticipate what the lead is doing, so that in the beginning he's telling you too much of this, little less of that. He's talking to his team.
Gotcha.
But we did it for 5 years. I did it for 4. So he didn't have to do that anymore.
Yeah. Now before we leave, we've got to wrap things up here. But before we leave, I got to ask you about, you worked on 2 movies that have nothing to do with Disney, but any viewer or listener knows I have an obsession with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids as well as Rick Moranis. So you worked with Rick Moranis on the Flintstones movie as well as Ghostbusters. So I'm just curious, any Rick Moranis stories, and when can you get him to be a guest on the show? No, let's just go.
Let's just
go with the first one.
I bet you could just call him up.
I wish I had his number, because I would.
Call his agent.
Dude.
So look up, just between you and I, go to SAG, find his agent. You can probably find it on IMDb, and then I would just inundate him, because he hasn't been in a lot of stuff.
No, he hasn't. I feel like he wants to stay pretty private.
Maybe just tell him you know he's probably wanting his privacy, but you love him. You think he's amazing, and you have this podcast. Check it out. Because I just can't imagine he wouldn't want to. This is such a nice little venue. Rick, I'm saying you got to do this. You would really enjoy it.
I'm sending him this clip then.
He was a really interesting little cat, because on Ghostbusters, he kind of kept to himself. My whole interaction ended up being with Bill Murray, who found me to be the most fun joke to play on me, because I'm gullible. So he just loves gullibility, and he made me his mission. So that's who I spent a lot of my time running from. But Rick, he kind of kept to himself. And I did a couple of things with him. He was friendly. He was nice. He was pleasant on Ghostbusters. Sigourney Weaver was amazing. She's 6'2"
Wow.
in her stocking feet. Just an amazing vision when she walks in. And my vision is her in a black and red checkered plaid coat that her mom had sent her, and she was walking around the set because it was around Christmas time and offering everybody cookies that her mom had baked. And I just thought, that's the one memory I have of her, is just anything she got from home she would share with the cast and crew, and we all felt like we were family with her, and I thought that was really super great. Ernie Hudson and I were really, really close because it was a big movie for Ernie, and he was really just fascinated at the whole effects part of. He had played other characters, but this was a big effects movie, and he was fascinated by the puppets, and he would have us over for barbecues and stuff. But Flintstones was a different case. Brian Levant, who did the Beethoven movies, was the director, and Rick Moranis had a couple of directing films under his belt. So he kept trying to direct Flintstones film, and you would just see Brian go red. He would just go, and Rick, I think, was just trying to help. Maybe Barney could do this, maybe they could do this. And Brian is a big fan of Flintstones, like you are. Yeah. He got the role by sleeping on Steven Spielberg's couch and waiting for Steven Spielberg to come in. He had all the figures all over his house. He was not taking no for an answer. Yeah. And Steven said, okay, well, all right, fine. And so I think it was just a friendly bashing of the heads, because Brian would turn and go,
yeah,
and Rick would be like, don't you think that's a great idea? Isn't that okay? He just really wanted to help and participate in the directing of the film. And I think that was the funniest thing that I saw about all of them. And then also they had to wear these leather kind of things glued to the bottom of their feet because they're supposed to be barefoot, and we're in a very hot rock quarry, and it would burn the bottom of your feet. So to keep them from burning the bottom of your feet, you would have this leather things, and every time they yelled cut, people would fall on their back like turtles and go so that was another thing that was kind of funny about it, but always pleasant. John Goodman and I became closer, and that's because I embarrassed him when I first met him and felt terrible, and he avoided me for the longest time. And then Steven Spielberg called Henson on the carpet for a character that Henson had designed, and Spielberg was doing Schindler's List at the time, and for him to be called away, he wasn't happy about it. So he said, I'm coming, and I'm going to look at the Henson performers, whatever the next scene is up, and if I don't like it, then... And so talk about pressure. The next scene was mine, the garbage disposal pig scene, and I was not getting it. In fact, I was having all kinds of challenges with it, and I don't know why. I just wasn't finding my feet. And my friend Anthony Ashbury was inside the character while I did the face articulation for it. And so I'm out in front with all of the people waiting to see whether my head's going to get chopped off or not. And then some people would go, okay, it's only our jobs. Good luck. And you would just go, So I was really nervous, and I was sitting out front at my station, and John Goodman was sitting in his Barcalounger as Fred Flintstone, and he was just looking at me like this. And I looked over and smiled and waved, and he kind of like diverted his eyes or whatever. And then I started laughing because we're connected by a headset so that we can communicate as puppeteers. And Anthony started to make jokes, and he started to loosen me up by making me laugh because I love to laugh. And then Spielberg walked in, and I was like,
yeah, right.
And he goes, Spielberg's in there? And I go, yes. Where is he? Right next to me. And Spielberg said, okay, let's do this thing. Tapped my shoulder, and we were off, and we were amazing. We were so funny. And I don't know what happened. Maybe I'm a fly or die kind of a girl. And oh my gosh, after it was done, he yelled cut. He said, you guys are great. I don't know what happened. I don't care. And what's your name? I said, Terri. He said, Terri, I want you and your team to come to dailies tomorrow. He never had people come to dailies.
That's
so
awesome.
We got to go and see dailies of our work. And that was his way of saying, these guys, I know they were under pressure and I want to reward them accordingly. Plus a really cool jacket. He gave us we didn't have to buy a jacket. He gave us a really cool baseball.
That's
Flintstones
awesome.
jacket.
I love that.
Everybody, Spielberg's just such a genuine, I think he realizes that he was once a struggling director.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever forgets that.
That's awesome.
So,
Well, Terri, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a lot of
Thank
fun.
you. This was so much
great
fun.
stories. Okay, folks, hope you enjoyed that interview. But of course, the show's not over yet. I'm sure you know what time it is. It's trivia time. Hey, folks, and welcome to Trivia Time. Today I have guest Jeremy on the show. Hello, Jeremy, and welcome to Trivia Time.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, you have a YouTube channel. Tell us a bit about it.
Well, my YouTube channel is called Jeremy Films. I tend to make vlogs at theme parks and just horror night videos in general. I like to make like short tribute videos. I made one for Mardi Gras, also made one from Halloween Horror Nights. I'm going to make another one this year for Halloween Horror Nights as well, but I just love making videos for people to enjoy.
Nice. Now, if you had you could only make one video in a Disney park, which land are you going to do it?
Pandora.
Pandora?
Yes. You could easily spend an entire day there just filming anything you see there. I mean, you have a lot of options when you walk into there. It's beautiful.
I'm happy to hear that the Floridians are still talking a lot about Avatar or Pandora, because everybody I talk to, my friends from there, everybody's still talking about it. But I got to say, here on the West Coast, it's kind of died down a bit. It was all over Twitter and everything when it first opened, obviously, but now not so much. So
Really?
yeah, no, I was actually talking to a good friend of mine in Orlando recently, and I was like, man, that's really not doing as well as they wanted, huh? And he's like, what are you talking about? Everybody is raving about it. I'm like, oh, it's died down out here. So
Wow.
yeah.
I feel like that happened with your guys' Hogsmeade as well.
Oh, well, that was a disaster. Listen, it's fantastic. As anybody who's experienced the Wizarding World of Harry Potter knows, at Universal Hollywood, we recently got Hogsmeade, and that those tickets, the return time ticket, they put up these kiosks for them, and invested a lot of money, never used them once.
Oh, gosh.
It was crazy. Anyway, none of this has anything to do with Disney, so let's jump into our Disney trivia right now, which the theme today is Adventureland. So you're our guest. Why don't you ask me a question first?
So my question is, how many birds are in the Tiki Room?
Oh, wow. Great question. I'm trying to think. There's not a lyric in the song that mentions it.
I don't think so.
You don't, or you do?
I don't think so.
Okay. How many birds are in the Tiki Room? Wow. I'm going to go, it's probably less than I think, because so much of it is flowers and totem poles and stuff singing. So I'm going to go with 62.
There's 150.
Whoa.
Yes.
That's a lot of birds.
Can you name at least one of them?
Is there a Pedro?
There is, yes.
Okay. And, let me think if I can think of anybody else. I can see the four main birds hanging there with their nameplates underneath. And what are the four names?
There's one, his name is Jose.
Jose, that's the one, yeah.
What's the other ones?
I don't know.
Pedro and Jose, the main ones I know.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, speaking of Adventureland, I want to know which attractions were in Adventureland on opening day of Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom.
I'm going to say the Swiss Family Treehouse.
That is correct.
The Jungle Cruise?
The Jungle Cruise is correct, yep.
And would I be correct if I say the Tiki Room?
You would kind of be correct.
It was a different kind of attraction though, right?
It was a different name.
Yes.
It was the same attraction from what I understand, but it had a different name. Do you know that name?
Man. Well, the full name right now is Enchanted Tiki Room, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Here at Disneyland, they call it Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, since it's his original attraction that they do here. Do they call it Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room in Florida now? I'm not sure.
No, I'm not sure, to be honest. I just call it the Tiki Room.
I think they do, because of the whole mess that they had with the whole under new management thing. I think that once they brought back the original, I think they put Walt's name on it. But before that, it was actually called Tropical Serenade.
Oh my gosh, I would never guess that.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because they had the whole sponsorship with remember the Orange Bird, which has like become popular again. The company, I forget who it was it Dole? I can't even remember exactly who it was, but they sponsored the attraction and they wanted something to promote them, I guess, and Tropical Serenade did it for them. So it actually wasn't called the Tiki Room, but yeah, I thought I might stump you there because I thought you might say Pirates of the Caribbean, but you were smart. You were smart enough to know.
That was like that was later, right?
Well, it opened at Disneyland in 1967, and the intention was never to have Pirates of the Caribbean at Walt Disney World because their thinking was it was too close to the actual Caribbean, that people wouldn't care to have that. And then people demanded it. Guests were like, no, it's like one of your classic attractions. We want this, which is why it's a much shorter version in Florida. It was just never intended to be there. So yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Anyway, thanks so much for coming on today's Trivia Time. Folks can find you. The username on YouTube is Jeremy Films, Filmzz. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. And I will leave a link in the comments on YouTube or in the description on YouTube. Thanks a bunch for coming on, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this week's show, folks. Of course, between episodes, you can connect with us in places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all of that can be found over at DisneyCoastToCoast.com. Have a magical week, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for watching Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.